The Healthcare Labyrinth podcast is back for another episode. Join Mark S. Ryan, a veteran health plan and health technology executive, as he explores the world of healthcare.
Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the Healthcare Labyrinth podcast. My name's Mark Ryan, and it's a pleasure to be hosting the podcast, and thanks to everyone for listening in. Today's podcast topic is the budget reconciliation bill that recently passed the House and has advanced to the Senate, where I think a big debate looms. The House GOP really threaded the needle so far on budget reconciliation, but I will tell you about that recent passage in the House and why I think in the Senate we're going to see a lot of fireworks, and perhaps we'll see fireworks back in the House if and when it returns. I am recording this about 10 days before it is aired, so some things could change between now and then. But I think everything I say here should stay accurate, but just be on the lookout for any updates or potential changes. We will take our normal 3 breaks to break this up a bit, so let's get started. So as I said, the House threaded the needle and passed the budget reconciliation bill on a tight 215 to 214 vote on May 22nd, meeting a self-imposed objective by the House GOP leadership of passage of the budget bill before the Memorial Day weekend, at least in its chamber. After conservatives initially tanked the bill in the Budget Committee on May 16th, and voted present on May 18th to advance the bill, President Trump visited the House GOP caucus on Capitol Hill on May 20th to urge holdouts to support the package. Trump pushed moderate Republicans from blue states to give up their fight over additional state and local tax deduction concessions, while warning conservative members not to, quote, F with Medicaid, unquote, as some lawmakers eyed further changes to the program. He said Republicans could fight for SALT changes later, and that he does not want to touch Medicaid except for eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, eliminating those on the rolls who entered the country illegally, and instituting work requirements. Trump's appearance, some backroom arm twisting, some concessions, and an appeal to party unity won the day and meant passage of the bill, even on a very tight vote. On May 22nd, 2 House Republicans voted against the bill and 1 voted present to get the bill to pass in the full House. So what exactly is budget reconciliation? Well, the process allows the bill largely for budget and policy matters to pass the Senate with just a majority vote. There's no need for 60 votes as is standard in the Senate, so you don't need to stop a filibuster with 60 votes and invoke cloture. The House has no such rules. It simply needs a majority vote on every bill. Generally, only one bill can be passed like this a year for budget and policy purposes. And there are specific rules that apply to what can be in the measure and the fiscal impacts. The bill is being used this year to extend most of Donald Trump's 2017 tax cuts and additional tax reductions that he promised during the campaign, such as no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, and eliminating all taxes on Social Security. There are about $3.8 trillion in tax cuts over a 10-year horizon in the House-passed budget reconciliation bill. The bill lifts the debt ceiling by $4 trillion as well. Average deficits under the bill grow from $1.9 trillion per year in FFY 2025 to $2.2 trillion per year on average over the 10-year horizon of the bill. Spending reductions amount to about $1.8 trillion over 10 years in the bill, with about $1.3 trillion in cuts from Medicaid, other health care, and SNAP nutrition program cuts. So let's now talk about the conservative concessions that were made to get the bill to pass in the House. House conservatives in the Freedom Caucus remain concerned about the overall small levels of reductions in the Mammoth bill and lack of structural change to Medicaid. Specifically, they complain spending reductions are backloaded, while tax decreases and extensions and some spending are front-loaded. In truth, they are being somewhat consistent as deficit hawks here. The conservatives wanted additional Medicaid structural changes and accelerated spending reductions. They obtained an acceleration of work requirements from 2029 to essentially 2027. It is likely impossible for states to do that so quickly. They also wanted further provider tax reform and a lowering of state reimbursement for the expansion population. They did not get those. They only got the acceleration of work requirements. Let's talk about the moderate concessions that were gained here. Moderates and swing district GOP lawmakers tend to overlap a great deal, and many are in blue or bluish states where many residents rely on Medicaid. Democrats are already targeting many of these districts for flipping, and a vote on major Medicaid cuts could be devastating for the GOP members. Some moderates have gotten comfortable with the idea of work requirements in some of the eligibility changes, but some remain concerned there as well as on provider tax limitations put in the bill. The moderates, too, want a more generous cap on state and local tax or SALT deductions. These were capped during 2017 on the tax bill. But liberalizing the amount of itemized state and local tax deductions is very costly, and conservatives are demanding added spending reductions to offset such a change. House moderates did cut a deal to further raise the state and local tax deduction limit put in place in 2017, but watering down Medicaid reductions did not occur. The SALT ceiling was lifted to $40,000 from $10,000, and a phase-out for incomes over $500,000 was put in place as well. In the end, the moderates hope voters like a greater SALT deduction and will ignore any Medicaid coverage impacts caused by the bill. Some of the cuts won't even be online before the 26th election, and some could be blamed on states or other forces. The conservatives received some additional spending cuts to close the increase in the deficit created by the last-minute SALT change. Each side was told that was it, and they must support the bill now given the importance to the GOP and the nation, and thus the tight vote happened and the House budget reconciliation bill passed. With that, we'll take our first break, and we'll come back and tell you what exactly is in this mammoth, big, beautiful reconciliation bill, as President Trump may put it. Be right back.
Health plans and insurance are confusing. Our healthcare system is in dire need of reform. Health policy expert Mark Ryan tackles both issues in his book, The Healthcare Labyrinth. It is both a guide to navigating health plans and fixing American health insurance. Mark dives deep into how health plans and the American health insurance system operate. He then outlines a comprehensive reform agenda for the system as a whole, including pricing, emphasizing health and care management, and ensuring affordable access to health coverage in a private delivery model. Mark is a bit of an unconventional Republican in that he believes affordable access is the morally right thing to do, and that it is also fiscally prudent for our nation. Learn more about Mark's book, The Healthcare Labyrinth, at healthcarelabyrinth.com or search at leading bookseller websites. Available in print, ebook, and audiobook forms.
Welcome back, and we hope you're enjoying this edition of the Healthcare Labyrinth podcast. We are talking about the recent passage in the House of the Budget Reconciliation Bill, and now that very controversial bill moves over to the Senate. So I promised to tell you what is in this bill fairly globally here. So for the record, here's what is in the bill now in terms of Medicaid cuts. My primary source is Healthcare Policy Group, KFF Briefers. So first, we have mandating that adults who are eligible for Medicaid via an expansion meet work requirements. Second, repealing the Biden administration's rule simplifying Medicaid eligibility and renewal processes. Third, frequent eligibility redeterminations every 6 months for expansion group populations. Fourth, establishing a moratorium on new or increased provider taxes as well as state-directed payment limits. These large items above account for over 90% of Medicaid savings. Other changes include cost sharing for expansion populations, 1-month retroactive periods for eligibility, reduction of the expansion match rate from 90 to 80% for states that use their own funds to provide health coverage or financial assistance to purchase health coverage for individuals who are not lawfully residing in the United States. Also, the bill requires the HHS Secretary to certify 1115 demonstration waivers are not expected to result in an increase in federal expenditures compared to federal expenditures without the waiver, and to specify a methodology for applying any budget neutrality savings in a waiver extension period. The bill also repeals the nursing staff rule. It also implements pharmacy benefits manager reform, including a ban on spread pricing in Medicaid and greater transparency in Medicare. KFF finds that Medicaid reductions amount to about 20% of state-financed Medicaid per resident. States have unequal impacts, and a lot is dependent on how each state responds to the changes and reductions from a policy and budget perspective. KFF says impacts range from 6% on the low end to 50% on the high end per state in terms of the amount financed in Medicaid per resident. Let's talk a little bit about Affordable Care Act reductions. Well, the bill includes the following: barring most legal immigrants from premium tax credits, rescission of the cap on premium repayment, and expiration of the enhanced premium subsidies in the exchange, because no extension was put in the bill. The bill also restores appropriations for the exchange cost-sharing reduction subsidies. This actually will reduce overall government costs, as premium subsidy costs will drop when so-called silver loading ends. Plans must have CSR offerings, and they increase premiums in silver products when CSR appropriations ended under Trump 45. With that, we'll take our second break now, and we'll come back to talk a little more about what is in the House Budget Reconciliation Bill. Be right back.
Lilac Software is proud to work with the Healthcare Labyrinth website to educate people on the healthcare system. At Lilac, we believe transparency is so important in healthcare. The healthcare system is opaque, and Lilac is trying to bring clarity to data and unleash the best member care, reduce costs, and improve outcomes. Our cloud-native payer platform revolutionizes data insights and analytics. Plans have all the data they need, but in silos locked away in point solutions. At Lilac, we solve the data fragmentation problem and help plans turn complex data into actionable insights, leading to greater operating leverage, tight cost controls, and healthier members. Health plans can improve STAR scores, reduce medical expense, drive revenue, and more. Quite simply, with Lilac, you can drive better business and health outcomes. Learn more at lilacsoftware.com.
Welcome back, and we hope you're enjoying this episode of the Healthcare Labyrinth podcast. We are talking about the recently passed House Budget Reconciliation Bill, which is now headed to the Senate and will generate a whole bunch of controversy. So we told you we would continue talking a bit about what is in the big, beautiful bill, as President Trump would put it, that was recently passed in the House. So let's talk about a few positives here. On the positive side, Medicare doctors get a rate fix finally. The bill replaces the current schedule of annual statutory increases to the Medicare physician fee schedule conversion factor with annual increases tied tied to the Medicare Economic Index, a measure of inflation in medical practice costs. The reality is that the old rate-setting system continually led to reductions, and this will help guarantee annual trends and increases. The conversion factor will be increased by 75% of the projected increase in the Medicare Economic Index in 2026 and by 10% of the projected increase in the MEI in all subsequent years. Not talked about much is the budget reconciliation bill's efforts to rebrand Trump's earlier push to promote individual coverage subsidies, known as ICHRA, and expanding health savings accounts and high-deductible health plan provisions. Let's get to some other reductions here by talking about what's known as sequestration provisions. There are also potential sequestration impacts. The Congressional Budget Office informed lawmakers shortly before the bill was voted on that healthcare programs could possibly face hundreds of billions of dollars in reductions through existing sequestration budget reduction rules. Existing law sequestration provisions could trigger future healthcare cuts beyond what are strictly outlined in the bill. The CBO estimates that an average annual increase of $230 billion will occur in the deficit each year under the legislation. This could result in the need to reduce spending by that amount annual because of sequestration rules. That could begin as early as federal fiscal year 26. The reductions are dependent on a number of parameters or triggering events. They could also be overridden in the future. Medicare is clearly impacted and in scope for sequestration, but Medicaid is not. Medicare cuts are limited to 4% per year, but that could mean about $45 billion in cuts for federal fiscal year 26 and beyond. Total cuts to Medicare could be about $500 billion in the 10-year horizon. With all of that explanation of what is in the bill now, we're going to take our last break, and we'll come back to talk about what now will occur in the Senate now that the House has passed the bill and it moves over to the upper chamber. Be right back.
The Healthcare Labyrinth is no ordinary website. It features news and commentary from one of the nation's leading healthcare policy and technology experts. Mark Ryan combs the internet for the latest healthcare news and publishes a news feed each weekday with summations and Mark's insights. Twice a week, Mark publishes a blog to go deep into a current issue. And of course, Mark hosts a podcast each week to delve even further. All of this is available at healthcarelabyrinth.com. Visit each day for the latest happenings in healthcare. As well, learn more about Mark's book, The Healthcare Labyrinth, at the website. That's healthcarelabyrinth.com. Your go-to source for healthcare news.
Welcome back, and we hope you're enjoying this episode of the Healthcare Labyrinth podcast. We're talking about the recently House-passed budget reconciliation bill, and now it's over in the Senate. So what will happen now that the bill is on to the Senate? Senate Republicans say they are going to rewrite the 1,116-page budget reconciliation bill the House passed on that tight vote. House Speaker Mike Johnson says the Senate needs to be judicious and make minimal changes to avoid another showdown in the House that could sink the bill. But Senate Majority Leader John Thune said his body will definitely have an imprint on the bill. The Senate is generally far more independent than the House. The Senate is also struggling with a philosophical divide, as the House was. There are between 5 and 7 moderates or pragmatic conservatives who right now are very concerned about the level of Medicaid and other cuts, and perhaps 4 more conservatives who don't see enough cuts. Rightist Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, will vote against the bill given the provision that increases the debt limit dramatically. Conservatives Ron Johnson, Republican of Wisconsin, Rick Scott, Republican of Florida, and Mike Lee, Republican of Utah, argue much deeper cuts need to occur. They also want deeper Medicaid cuts and structural changes, much like conservatives in the House, such as state matching fund reductions. On the other hand, moderates and pragmatic conservatives Josh Hawley, Republican of Missouri, Susan Collins, Republican of Maine, Lisa Murkowski, Republican of Alaska, and Jerry Moran, Republican of Kansas, are threatening to be off the bill due to Medicaid reductions that would cut benefits. Most of these folks can stomach Medicaid work requirements, but they are concerned about the impact to reimbursement to states and the impact on coverage, especially related to provider tax reform. They are also worried about impacts to state budgets and to providers. As you can see, there are at least 4 votes on each side of the ideological spectrum that could sink the House bill as is in the Senate. At the same time, making changes that all can get on will be a struggle. Last, the Senate may target removal of the state and local taxes deduction increase. That would sink any revised bill in the House. If the Senate were to pass the bill with lower cuts or not enough SALT concessions, it throws the outcome in the House very much in doubt. House conservatives could dig their heels in if the projected deficit and debt blossoms in the Senate bill. The government runs out of money sometime in July. Conservatives want any debt cap lift or higher threshold tied to sufficient spending reductions. Some Senate budget hawks might agree too. The House GOP can have no more than 3 no votes, and the Senate GOP no more than 4. So will they get this done, and when would any bill pass in its final form? Whatever the electoral implications on elections in 2026 and the GOP keeping House control, the Senate looks reasonably good for the GOP will have to pass a bill. Trump is demanding it, and most see it as a key policy provision, even if they argue about the fine points. But based on what has occurred and the major fissures that have erupted, quick passage of a final congressional bill is some time off. Target summer at the earliest, in my view. With that, we'll end this episode of the Healthcare Labyrinth podcast, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Thanks for joining Mark and the Healthcare Labyrinth podcast. Go to healthcarelabyrinth.com each day for the latest healthcare news. See you next week on the next Healthcare Labyrinth podcast.